What is the difference between tanks from the First World War and the Second World War? Let's find out. Hey, welcome back regular viewers. My name is Stefan. I'm a history teacher, hustling history for you. If you like this content, if you like history, you want to learn more about that, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell to join the hustle. Let's start. I'm here in the East Ukrainian city of Kharkiv in front of the historical museum, and behind me you see two tanks, one from World War I and one from World War II. So what is the difference between these tanks? World War I tanks were fabricated to break the stalemate of the trench warfare. Up until that point, strategies consisted of an artillery barrage plus a wave of infantry. However, if only one enemy machine gun survived the barrage, the attackers would be mown down by the masses, not to mention the barbed wire they could get stuck in. Now this piece of work here is a British Mark V tank developed in 1918 in the last stages of the First World War. It saw its debut during the Battle of Hallen in July 1918. It had continuous tracks, as you can see, armed to the teeth with several guns, and was manned by 8 soldiers, 1 driver, 1 commander and 6 gunners. 70 of these tanks were handed over to the White Russian armies, who fought against the Red armies in the Russian Civil War. The Allies hoped they could change the tide of Bolshevism, and they also sent an intervention force on several points in Russia. The Reds eventually captures these tanks from the Whites and use these tanks to invade Georgia, to annex that to what became later known as the Soviet Union. Oh, and actually, did you know that when the Allies captured Berlin at the end of the Second World War in Europe, they found 2 badly damaged Mark V tanks there? And what were these tanks doing there? Alright, the Germans had captured 2 of these tanks after the Battle of Smolensk, 1941, when they invaded the Soviet Union. These tanks were there on display, and eventually these tanks were transferred to Berlin, although it's not entirely clear whether these tanks had seen action in Berlin. Then obviously the Germans also had tanks in the First World War, and the French. And if you look at the French model, they kind of look like the tanks that would be later used in the Second World War. Let's take a look. Now this here is the Russian T-3485, the successor of the 76 that was developed in 1943 with a more armed turret and had to combat the German Tiger I tank. Now one big threat these tanks also faced wasn't from German tanks, no, from German militias, and I'm talking about the Volksstorm. When the Soviets invaded the German territories of East Prussia and eventually the territories that are now part of Western Poland, basically the German homeland, the Germans mobilized the so-called Volksstorm. These consisted of men that were either too young or too old to serve in the regular army, and these militias, as you will, had to fight against the Russians as a last desperate attempt to change the tide. These men were often equipped with a Panzerfaust, and this piece of equipment was able to pierce the panzer of these tanks. And eventually the Russians made their own protective gear to protect their tanks against these Panzerfausts. And as you can see, the Second World War was much more about speed. It was a war of movement, gaining ground fast instead of just breaking a stalemate like you see at the other tank. The World War I tank could reach a speed of 4 miles per hour, 6-7 kilometers per hour, had a range of 22 miles, 35 kilometers, and had a 6 to 12 millimeter armor. The World War II tank could reach a speed of 24 miles per hour, 38 kilometers per hour, had a range of 100 miles, 160 kilometers, and had an armor of 62 millimeter. So what is your favorite tank and why? Please leave it in the comments down below. You can also check me out on Instagram for more cool pictures of this, and also check me out on Patreon, because with your donations I can travel to places like this and make videos like this. Do not forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you later.